Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a question. Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible? Not because you were quiet, not because you lacked value, but because someone chose not to see you, not to hear you, not to respect you. We've all been there. In life, in work, in our closest relationships, we meet people who, for reasons of their own, choose to treat us as less than. And when that happens, the first instinct is often to fight, to shout, to defend. But here's the truth: how we handle disrespect doesn't just reveal who they are, but reveals who we are. You see, I believe people don't follow titles, they follow courage. And in the face of disrespect, your response can either reinforce the chaos or lead with strength. Not aggression, not silence, but leadership. Today, I want to share with you 5 powerful ways to handle people who don't respect you. Not just to protect your peace, but to grow your influence and lead by example. Because when we choose to lead ourselves with dignity, we invite others to rise, or we rise above them. Let's begin with why this matters. When someone disrespects us, our first instinct is often emotional. We feel hurt, angry, defensive. That reaction is natural. It's part of being human. But when we allow ourselves to be ruled by emotion in that moment, we hand over control to the person who disrespected us in the first place. They act without regard, and we react without intention. That's not power. That's being pulled by someone else's lack of control. Leading with calm, especially in the face of disrespect, is not a weakness. It is an extraordinary strength. It's not about being passive, and it's certainly not about being a doormat. It's about making a conscious choice. I will not let your behavior dictate mine. That's leadership. That's self-respect. And that's how we maintain control of the situation, and of ourselves. Imagine a scenario: you're in a meeting and a colleague publicly undermines your idea with sarcasm or a dismissive comment. The room falls quiet. All eyes shift to you. Now you have a choice. You can snap back, escalate the tension, and risk being seen as unprofessional or unstable. Or you can pause, take a breath, and respond with composure. Not because you're pretending not to care, but because you care more about your long-term credibility than a short-term win. Leading with calm starts with understanding your emotional triggers. When we don't understand why something affects us deeply, we become reactive. But when we pause and reflect, why did that comment sting? What is it really threatening? We begin to gain clarity. Often disrespect pokes at our need to feel valued, validated, or in control. Knowing this helps us separate the act from our identity. Disrespect is about the other person. Your response is about you. Sinek often talks about the importance of starting with why. When someone disrespects you, ask yourself, why? Why am I choosing this reaction? Is it to prove I'm not weak? Is it to save face? Is it to get even? These are all emotional reactions rooted in ego and insecurity. But if your why is to preserve your integrity, protect your peace, or demonstrate true leadership, then your reaction becomes a reflection of who you are, not who they are. Leading with calm also means being deliberate with your tone, your posture, and your presence. People are drawn to those who remain grounded in chaos. It creates a sense of stability and trust. When you respond to disrespect with calm confidence, you set a powerful example, not just for the person who disrespected you, but for everyone watching. Because trust me, people are watching. They notice who keeps their composure when things get uncomfortable. This isn't about pretending things don't bother you. It's about choosing how, when, and where you respond. You don't have to fight every battle. In fact, the most impactful people often choose their moments with care. Sometimes, the best way to show someone you won't tolerate disrespect is to remain unshaken in the moment and then address the issue later, in private, with calm assertiveness. There's a quote that says, "Speak when you are angry, and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret." That's why leading with calm is so vital. It gives you time to think, to respond instead of react, and to protect your reputation and values in the process. Over time, people begin to recognize this in you. They see that you don't get easily rattled, that your confidence doesn't require validation, that your silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And that kind of presence is magnetic. It's how respect is earned, even from those who initially tried to deny you of it. Remember, the goal isn't to win a battle of words. It's to rise above a moment of disrespect without losing who you are in the process. That's why calm is powerful. Calm is strength under control. Calm is clarity in the noise. And calm is the language of leaders. So the next time someone disrespects you, take a breath. Let your silence speak louder than their words. Let your presence do what their performance can't. And lead not with force, not with fear, but with calm. Respect begins where boundaries are clearly drawn. Many people confuse boundaries with barriers. They think setting limits means pushing people away or being cold. But boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks. They don't isolate you, they protect you. They define where you end and where someone else begins. And when someone disrespects you, it's often because they have crossed a boundary you never clearly set. The truth is, people treat you based on what you tolerate. If you allow constant interruptions, they'll keep interrupting. If you accept passive-aggressive behavior, they'll continue to deliver it. If you laugh off disrespect to keep the peace, you've unknowingly taught them that your dignity is negotiable. That's not humility. That's erosion. Setting boundaries is not about punishment. It's about clarity. It tells others, this is how I expect to be treated. This is what is okay, and this is what is not. And just like traffic signs, boundaries are most effective when they're clear, visible, and consistently enforced. You don't need to yell. You don't need to over-explain. You simply need to be firm and consistent. For example, if a friend constantly makes jokes at your expense in social settings, a boundary might sound like, I'm asking you not to joke about me like that in front of others. It may seem harmless to you, but it makes me uncomfortable. This isn't about confrontation. It's about communication. When you voice your boundary with calm assertiveness, you give the other person a choice to respect your limit or choose a different kind of relationship. Simon Sinek often emphasizes trust and consistency in leadership. The same applies to setting boundaries. If you set a limit and then ignore it the next time it's crossed, you dilute its power. People begin to realize that your words are more like suggestions than standards. That's why holding your own line is just as important as drawing it. Some people won't like your boundaries. That's okay. Discomfort is often the first sign that your boundary is working. It shifts the balance of control and forces people to reconsider how they treat you. But remember, you're not setting boundaries to be liked. You're setting them to be respected. This can be especially challenging in relationships where emotional ties are strong. Family, partners, close friends. These are often the places where boundaries are most needed and hardest to enforce. But emotional closeness should never be an excuse for disrespect. You can love someone deeply and still say, this is not okay with me. In fact, real love includes respect. And without boundaries, love loses its shape and becomes something that drains you instead of builds you. Boundaries also protect your energy. Every time you allow someone to speak to you with disrespect, every time you give in to someone who constantly oversteps, you make a small withdrawal from your emotional bank. Over time, that account goes into deficit, and the cost is often your confidence, peace, and sense of self-worth. Boundaries are how you keep your account in balance. They remind both you and others of your value. It's important to recognize that setting boundaries doesn't mean you have to announce them dramatically. Sometimes your actions are your boundaries, not answering a disrespectful text, choosing not to engage in gossip, walking away from a toxic conversation. Boundaries can be loud or silent, but they always speak. A powerful mindset shift is this: it's not my job to manage how others feel about my boundary. It's my job to protect my space with honesty and grace. You're not being selfish for protecting your peace. You're being responsible. You're taking ownership of how others are allowed to interact with you. In time, people learn. They learn that you don't respond to guilt tripping, that you won't tolerate belittling, that they can't manipulate you with anger or shame. And even if some don't adjust, the ones who truly respect you will. Boundaries don't push the right people away, they filter them in. So when faced with disrespect, don't just retreat or retaliate. Reflect, then respond. Ask yourself, what boundary needs to be set here? And then, without anger, without apology, set it not with cruelty, but with clarity, because people may not always give the respect you deserve, but your boundaries will teach them what you expect. And that lesson, taught calmly and consistently, is one they won't easily forget. In moments of disrespect, our natural instinct is often to react emotionally. It's human to feel hurt, insulted, or angry when someone talks down to us, dismisses our ideas, or undermines our presence. But when we let emotion take the driver's seat, we risk losing control of the message we truly want to send. That's why one of the most powerful skills you can develop is the ability to respond with clarity, not emotion. Responding with clarity means choosing to focus on the facts instead of the feelings. It means separating what happened from how it made you feel, at least in the moment, and communicating in a way that addresses the behavior, not just the emotion it triggered. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It means you don't let them shape your response in ways that make the situation worse or cloud your judgment. Let's say a colleague interrupts you repeatedly during a meeting. Your immediate emotional response might be frustration or even embarrassment. If you respond emotionally, you might snap at them or withdraw completely. But a clear response might sound like, I'd like to finish my point before we move on. It's direct, firm, and respectful. No drama, no personal attack, just a clear call for respectful behavior. Clarity creates structure in emotionally messy moments. It helps you stay grounded when someone else is trying to throw you off balance. When you respond with clarity, you make it easier for others to hear you, understand your boundary, and reflect on their behavior. Emotionally charged responses, shouting, sarcasm, or shutting down, tend to escalate the conflict or derail the conversation altogether. Simon Sinek often says that great leaders are those who can stay calm in chaos. Part of that calm comes from knowing what matters most. In situations of disrespect, clarity keeps your message focused. You're not there to prove a point, win a fight, or defend your ego. You're there to protect your values and communicate your standards. When that's your goal, clarity becomes your most effective tool. It's also worth understanding that emotional reactions often give power to the other person. If someone disrespects you and you explode in anger, they have succeeded in controlling your emotional state. If you become defensive or overly apologetic, you might unintentionally validate their behavior. But if you respond with clear, calm, thoughtful words, you shift the power dynamic. You remain in control, not just of the conversation, but of yourself. Clarity doesn't mean being cold. It means being intentional. It means taking a breath before speaking. It means choosing words that reflect strength and integrity, not insecurity or hurt. And it often means asking yourself, what is the outcome I want from this interaction? If your goal is to be heard, to be respected, and to move forward with dignity, then clarity must take precedence over emotion. This doesn't come naturally to most of us. It takes practice. It takes learning to pause before reacting. It takes awareness of your emotional triggers and the ability to notice them rising without letting them take over. Over time, that pause becomes a habit. That breath between stimulus and response becomes a space of strength. And in that space, clarity lives. Let's be clear. Some people will try to provoke you. They'll use disrespect as a tactic, hoping to get a rise out of you or to knock you off your center. That's why clarity is not just a response. It's a strategy. It's how you show that you won't be manipulated, that don't operate on someone else's terms, and that you know exactly who you are and what you stand for. Think about the most respected people you know. Chances are, they're not the loudest in the room or the quickest to argue. They're the ones who speak with calm authority, who know how to address difficult situations without losing their composure. That's the power of clarity. It draws respect because it signals self-awareness, confidence, and discipline. So the next time someone disrespects you, stop before you react. Ask yourself what you really want to communicate. Let the emotion inform your understanding, but not your delivery. Speak with clarity, not as a way to suppress your feelings, but as a way to elevate the conversation. Because when you respond with clarity, you take control of the narrative, maintain your dignity, and teach others exactly how you expect to be treated. Knowing your worth is one of the most essential tools you can carry when facing disrespect. It is your internal compass, the invisible backbone that shapes how you walk into a room, how you speak, stand up for yourself, and most importantly, how you allow others to treat you. Without a strong sense of self-worth, it becomes easy to accept mistreatment as normal, to rationalize respect, and to shrink ourselves to fit the comfort zones of others. Acting like you know your worth doesn't mean being arrogant or aggressive. It means operating from a place of quiet confidence that says, I don't need to prove myself to you. I already know who I am. That kind of self-assurance cannot be faked, and it certainly cannot be given to you by someone else. It's something you develop through reflection, growth, and an unwavering commitment to self-respect. When you truly understand your value, disrespect becomes easier to identify and reject. You stop second-guessing yourself every time someone makes a snide comment. You stop twisting yourself into knots trying to earn validation from people who have no intention of giving it. Instead, you start measuring your interactions through a different lens. Does this align with the way I deserve to be treated? People often accept disrespect because they've been conditioned to believe they need to tolerate it to be accepted. By friends, by partners, by authority figures. But your worth is not determined by how many people approve of you. It's measured by how consistently you choose to honor yourself, even when others don't. Imagine someone ignores your contribution in a team setting or talks over you repeatedly. If you don't believe in your value, you might stay quiet, internalizing the disrespect and doubting your own voice. But when you know your worth, you'll find the courage to speak up, not to attack, but to affirm, I'd like to finish my thought, please. A small moment, but one filled with power. Simon Sinek often says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The same applies to how you carry yourself. People respond not just to your words, but to the energy and conviction behind them. When you believe in your worth, you communicate with a presence that doesn't beg for respect. It commands it quietly and consistently. Knowing your worth also changes how you handle rejection and criticism. Instead of taking everything personally, you begin to filter feedback through discernment. You ask, Is this constructive, or is this just someone projecting their own insecurities? That discernment protects your mental and emotional space, allowing you to grow from feedback that serves you and ignore the rest. It's also important to remember that knowing your worth isn't just about what you say, it's about the decisions you make. It's in the boundaries you set. It's in the relationships you choose. It's in the opportunities you pursue and the ones you walk away from. When someone disrespects you and you continue to engage with them as if nothing happened, you send a message, not just to them, but to yourself, that your worth is flexible. But when you address it, or when necessary, distance yourself from that energy, you reinforce your value. This doesn't mean you always have to make a scene or cut people off at the first sign of disrespect. It means you're always observing, always evaluating. Does this relationship reflect the respect I have for myself? And when the answer is no, you take action aligned with your self-worth. Living from a place of self-worth also invites better connections. When you hold yourself in high regard, you attract people who mirror that energy. You naturally repel those who thrive on control, manipulation, or belittlement because they quickly realize you are not someone who will tolerate it. Your self-respect becomes a filter. And let's be clear, knowing your worth doesn't mean you never struggle with doubt. Everyone does. The difference is that even when you feel unsure, you remind yourself of the truthing you are enough, as you are not defined by someone else's inability to see your value. So act like you know your worth, not for them, but for you. Let it guide your tone, your posture, your decisions. Let it be the voice that steadies you when someone tries to make you feel small. Because in the end, the most powerful response to disrespect isn't anger or silence, it's self-respect. And nothing speaks louder than someone who knows exactly what they bring to the table and never feels the need to prove it. When someone disrespects you, the easiest reaction is to mirror their behavior. They speak to you with sarcasm, and you return it. They ignore you, and you give them the cold shoulder. They raise their voice, and you raise yours. It feels like justice in the moment, a way of saying, you don't get to treat me like that. But while mirroring disrespect may offer temporary satisfaction, it rarely brings long-term respect or peace. It drags you down to the very level you wish to rise above. The truth is, how we respond to others is not a reflection of them, it's a reflection of us. When you meet disrespect with disrespect, you surrender your control. You let the other person's behavior dictate your own. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to lose the very qualities that define your character: patience, kindness, composure, strength. Choosing not to mirror disrespect doesn't mean you allow people to walk over you. It means you elevate the conversation. You refuse to let someone else's negativity pull you into a pattern that isn't aligned with who you are or who you want to be. You maintain your standards, even when others don't maintain theirs. Think about the people you admire most, not because they were loud or forceful, but because they carried themselves with a steady kind of strength. People who kept their heads when others lost theirs. Who responded with poise when they were challenged or insulted. That's not weakness. That's leadership. That's emotional maturity. Simon Sinek often emphasizes the power of modeling behavior. As a leader, and make no mistake, you are a leader in your own life. You are constantly setting an example. People are watching how you respond under pressure, how you handle conflict, and how you carry yourself when things don't go your way. If you want to be respected, you must act in a way that is worthy of respect, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. When you model respect in the face of disrespect, you change the energy in the room. You break the cycle. Instead of creating another argument, you create pause. You force the other person and everyone else watching to reconsider their behavior. Because your calm, respectful response sends a powerful message. You will not bring me down to your level. I know who I am, and I choose to stay true to that. This doesn't mean you ignore what happened. It doesn't mean you stay silent or avoid conflict. It means you respond intentionally. You say what needs to be said, but you say it with clarity and integrity. You correct someone, but you don't belittle them. You draw a line, but you don't draw a sword. For example, if someone speaks to you with a condescending tone, you can respond with, I'm open to having this conversation, but I'd like it to stay respectful. This is not passive, it's powerful. You're not stooping to their level, you're inviting them to rise to yours. Mirroring respect instead of disrespect also protects your emotional well-being. When you engage in negativity, even as a form of retaliation, it affects you. It lingers, you carry that energy with you. But when you choose respect, you maintain your peace. You leave the interaction knowing you stayed in control of your response, and that alone is a victory. There will be people who see your respectful behavior as weakness. Let them. Their judgment says more about their values than yours. The people who matter, the ones who truly understand strength, will see your restraint for what it is: discipline, dignity, and leadership. And if the disrespect continues, you still have choices. Respecting someone doesn't mean you continue to engage with them. It means you can step away without hate. You can distance yourself without drama. You can remove yourself from toxic environments with grace, not revenge. So when disrespect shows up, and it will, remember that every response is an opportunity. You can mirror what you were given, or you can model what you expect. One reinforces the problem, the other rewrites the narrative. Choosing to model respect is not about being nice. It's about being powerful in a way that builds, not breaks. It's about standing tall, not just for the world to see, but so you can look yourself in the mirror and be proud of who you are, no matter how anyone else chooses to behave. Walking away is often misunderstood. Some see it as giving up, as a sign of weakness or surrender. But walking away is not about losing. It's about choosing. It's about choosing your peace over chaos, your dignity over conflict, and your future over someone else's noise. In fact, one of the most powerful things you can do when someone repeatedly disrespects you is to remove yourself, not in anger, not with vengeance, but with quiet certainty that you deserve better. We live in a world where staying, fighting, proving, and explaining are often glorified. But not every battle is worth fighting, and not every person is worth your time or energy. The strength to walk away comes from knowing that your self-worth doesn't depend on someone else's validation. It doesn't hinge on whether they finally see your value, apologize, or change. It comes from a place of deep internal alignment that says, this is not serving me anymore. When you walk away from someone who disrespects you, you're making a clear statement to them and to yourself. You're saying, I won't beg for respect. I won't stay where I'm not valued. I won't allow your behavior to define my experience. That kind of action doesn't require words or confrontation. Sometimes the most eloquent statement is silence and distance. Sinek talks often about clarity of purpose. Walking away is easier when you're clear about your purpose. When you know who you are, what you stand for, and where you're headed, it becomes clear which relationships, environments, and behaviors are misaligned with your journey. Not everyone is meant to walk with you. Some people are meant to teach you a lesson and then be left behind. This doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're heartless. On the contrary, walking away often comes after you've cared deeply, after you've tried, after you've communicated your boundaries, expressed your feelings, and given someone the opportunity to grow. But when they choose not to, when they continue to violate your space, you reach a point where the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to let go. Letting go doesn't mean there's no pain. It's not always a clean break. It might come with grief, especially if the person was close to you. A friend, a family member, a partner, even a colleague. But the pain of walking away is often far less damaging than the slow erosion that comes from staying in a place where you're not respected. People will test you. They'll push your limits to see what they can get away with. And sometimes the only thing that will get their attention or reveal their true nature is your absence. When you no longer respond, no longer engage, no longer make yourself available to disrespect, you take away their power. That silence, that distance, becomes your loudest message. Walking away is also an act of faith. It's trusting that by letting go of what is hurting you, you make space for something better, healthier relationships, peaceful environments, a stronger version of yourself. You show the universe or life itself that you are ready to move forward with purpose and intention. It's important to note that walking away is not always physical. Sometimes it means emotionally detaching. It means no longer internalizing someone's words or behavior. You might still share a space with them at work, in a family, but you create an invisible boundary that says, you no longer get access to my emotional core. And sometimes, walking away is exactly what inspires change. Not because you intended it, but because your absence forces the other person to confront their actions. Some people only reflect after the silence. Some only learn through distance. And while you should never walk away just to provoke change, know that your decision may have a ripple effect far beyond what you see. Ultimately, you don't owe anyone endless explanations, second chances, or unlimited tolerance. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself the right to live a life surrounded by people who uplift and respect you. So if someone continues to ignore your boundaries, mock your values, or treat you with contempt, it's okay to leave. It's okay to choose yourself, because walking away is not weakness. It's not defeat. It's strength. It's freedom. And it's the final, most powerful way to say, I know my worth, I deserve better, and I refuse to settle for less